I didn't know you visited 200 schools between 2017 and 2018. It's got a minute ahead of the pandemic, that was thinking.
In fact, the pandemic mercifully ended it. It was diminishing returns, and it was great. It was one of the positive, of which there were not many, but one of the positive effects of the pandemic was it stopped. I had over committed, and it was like I wasn't getting writing done. I was, I just got so excited about doing school visits because it's so much fun, and I just, like I said, I bit off more than I could chew, and it was really mercifully when the pandemic shut everything down, I got to stop doing that.
200 visits.
Yeah, I did over 100 in 2018. Over 100. I just because I wanted to.
Yeah, but that's almost like a teaching job at that point.
Yeah, but it is like a teaching job, but it's a little different. And in fact, I learned so much because I got to go 100 different schools. So it's not like 100 days in a school where you would actually be a teacher or an educational professional, but I visited every type of school, and from inner cities to private schools on the coast, and it was really, you learn a lot because you see people in the same group of people interested in the same general, kids books, but in 100 or 200 different, very different settings. And my thing I told my friends, or I told people, is no matter what, you can go to the most busy, struggling, crowded inner city school, or the most tawny private school, or the most idyllic little small school. And when you take a picture, there's always some jerky kid who makes a face. And I'm trying to think, it was 2017, there was some dance. I've now already forgotten about it, but there was some gesture that had spread the internet. And in every time you take a photo with the kids, there was always some boy, usually a boy, in the crowd, who right before, 1, 2, 3, and then he did some dance move. I don't know if it came from Fortnite, or it was the doogie, or it was something. I've forgotten the name, and that made me think all is going to be all right in the universe, because everybody's the same. There's always that kid. And I remember, and then I'll get off this. I remember when I had this one of my favorite, best school visits, of which they are few and far between that are this good, that it was an all school one book visit, and it had hundreds of kids dressed up like characters in one of the books. And again, rarely happens, but 400 kids, and we all got together at the end for a class picture, and they went 1, 2, 3, and some kid in the front struck the pose, and the principal of the school leaned over and whispered in my ear, "I really hate that kid."
Really?
but it is reassuring, when you hear the people, it's built into the DNA. People are the same, and leading into Middle Grade Ninja, and everybody loves characters and their adventures and stories, regardless of the format. And ultimately, you think about a movie number 47 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where once again they are wrecking the city and nobody's going to clean up. That's why they get to be that's the best part of being a superhero, is you don't have to clean up afterwards. And at the end of the day, you remember the name of the characters, because that's really what's important.
I feel like this is too good. We should call this the start of the show, if that's all right.
Okay. Yeah. I like I said, the dogs are sedated, and I'm wound up and ready to go.
So, hi there, esteemed audience. Welcome. My guest today is R.U. Gins, Russell Gins.
Russell Gins,
Russell Gins.
writing as R.U. Gins, which is an excellent question.
R.U. Gins, author of the new terrifying, hilarifying book, 1, 2, 3, Scream. So get your copy. So you must have some kind of rapport with a principal if he's leaning over to you and telling you which children he dislikes.
No, it just came up because, like I said, there's always one kid. And by the way, if you're a teacher, and I believe this to be a truth, 80 to 90% of your time and energy is about dealing with that one kid. I call him Nolan. I don't know. The names are changed to protect the innocent, but most people have no idea what teachers do and how much work it is. That's why it makes me crazy when I hear people who are not teachers criticizing teachers because they have no idea what a teacher does and how much work is not, getting an apple from the student and pointing to a chalkboard, teaching the letters of the alphabet or sentence diagram. It's all getting kids to be able to care about learning, and to that point, there's always Nolan, that one kid who takes up 90% of a teacher or a librarian's time. And then the teacher winds up doing so much of their lesson planning after school or on vacation or at midnight, because in class, you're just trying to get to what's important, which is engaging your learners.
When you come in, I watched some of your presentations online for Samantha Spinner, and you come out with your red umbrella and you played the song. You wrote the theme song, right?
Oh yeah, yes, all about the theme song. I think that's why I'm doing everything, just to get to do the theme songs.
when you're doing the presentation and the Nolan kid, the rotten kid, tries to make mischief, like being heckled at a comedy club, well, how do you deal with those kids?
Oh, one, I've never done stand-up comedy. I can't imagine anything harder. And no, I think I've overstated the rotten kid. I was more speaking about my appreciation for teachers. Because I get to, when you're an author and you visit a school, and it could be, 3 kids in a library or 1 kid in an independent bookstore who shows up, you're a rock star. You get to, it's your chance to connect. So I think I may have overstated the bad kid. I was more about, there's always that one kid in the crowd, in a big crowd, torturing the teacher. But no, I have had 0 bad experiences with a kid in the crowd, because when you get to visit a school and you're an author, everybody's already won, because the teachers get a break, the kids get to go do something that's not normal, and so everybody's already won, everybody's excited. And the librarian who usually sets it up, or the reading specialist, gets a moment in their otherwise occupied week where everyone says, hey, books are important, reading is important, you're going to visit an author because writing and reading is important. So when you get to go in and do a school visit, regardless of the scale or the setup, you've already won. And just to basically shake a kid and by presentation, say, hey everybody, storytelling is a job. Storytelling is a worthwhile activity. Reading is something that's really cool, or, stories and characters. So no, I never get heckled. And although it's really important, here's my single most important advice to anybody who does presentations with more than 3 kids. Always say, what's the sign for being quiet? I was going to say shutting up. What's the symbol? Because almost, or I think every school has their, this is, Hoover's quiet, or this is, Panther's silence, whatever. Every school has the symbol. I think it's frequently, put up a finger or something, got to do something that somebody else isn't going to claim ownership or offense to, but there's always a, put up your hand and everybody gets quiet. So I always, when you get in front of the crowd, everybody's excited because they got out of class, and the teachers are delighted because they can go out and, talk to each other. And in fact, teachers talking in the back is a lot more of a problem than kids heckling in the front. So my author visit tip is always, you get in front of the kids and you say, "Hey everybody, what's the sign?" To be quiet, and they all get all excited because now we're sharing, we're exchanging ideas, and they're all delighted to tell you, "Shut up," or Burns Park Elementary, be quiet, and everybody gets quiet, and then later you do that, and so I forget who taught me that, but that is an important tip for visiting schools.
I love when the sign is the L for listen, because of course I always grew up with it. It was also L for loser.
Oh,
yeah, put it right there.
Yeah, and especially, I'm so, and again, I've never had any bad experience or blowback or anything, but yeah, you do wonder, like, does this mean, doom, you're dead in Australia? Is this the gang that they just ran out of town used to give this, so you gotta, I never had to worry about that, but it is a funny thought. I think now I'm old. I remember President Bush, the first President Bush, he went to Australia, and I remember reading or hearing he gave the peace sign to a crowd of people, and a bunch of people went, because apparently that's something bad in Australia.
Better than when he threw up on the prime minister.
Yeah.
Step up.
Yeah, but again, I think about little things like that, but again, no, the school visits are nothing but joy, and I've never had a bad experience, and that's why I signed up to do way too many. And thank you, in this one incident, thank you, COVID, for shutting that off or slowing that down. And now I'm going back, and I just do a very few. Now I tell people I do local visits for friends and family, or if you ask, really, really nice, because you can, and maybe we'll get to this in our author discussion. You can wind up being a free marketing employee of a company instead of an author, because what company doesn't want to say, yeah, this guy will go help you sell your product for free day and night, which is a big part of being an author, but you can overdo it. And I think I fell a little bit into that trap when in 2017 or 2018, when I said, sure, I'll run into 200 schools and do presentations, because it can distract you from storytelling, sitting in the chair and writing, things like that.
Were you at least charging an honorarium to bring in?
I do now, and I did, but I got so excited. I was just doing it a lot, and now I still don't want to, because there's so many places that can't do it as much. So I don't. And again, you can make the mistake of, if you don't charge anything, people don't value you, and so you got to be careful, because you do have to charge, or say, hey, buy a dozen books, or buy 1,000 books, or whatever. I think you have to do that, because I did. That was another at 2017 mistake, where I was just not that it's not great to give it away and just give back or get kids excited, because you are getting publicity, you are getting your book out there, but definitely if you don't charge at all, people don't value you. When they're standing out in front of the train station in Manhattan giving away little packets of Advil on tax day, people take it, and whether or not they're ever going to open that packet of Advil, because it was free. And I think you can if you don't charge, seriously, if you don't charge, then the school won't do as much. They won't build it up. They won't tell kids about it and as much. And I mean, I think that's probably true of absolutely everything, up to, if you charge someone, at Tiffany's, $28,000 for a little gem, because you've told them it's valuable, so people want people.
I need to start charging for this podcast, it sounds like.
Absolutely. You could have made a couple $100 off of me.
Sure. Well, I do wonder sometimes when you're doing school visits or any kind of in-person visit in our modern age where you could hop online, and I saw a lot of this during the pandemic. One nice thing, there is no nice thing about the pandemic. We all wish it had not happened. It would have been better not to have happened, but because it did happen, I think this show flourished in part because there were so many authors looking for a way to promote their stories, and they weren't able to do those in-person events. They were able to come and talk to me, which was nice. And I wonder sometimes when you go and you do those in-person visits, as wonderful as that is, if you do an event like this, or you go online, you write a post, you make a video, you write a song for your book, and people can play it at their leisure whenever they want, you're going to reach far more eyeballs than you can contain in any one school gymnasium most of the time. How much does that factor into your decision when you're deciding what type of marketing event should you do?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I would say, yeah, now that the world is on Zoom and it's no longer unusual, and there's a few authors can take the time to get on a bus or a plane or a train or a car or a bicycle and go to 1,000 miles away, and then especially if it's a small group of a reading club or a classroom with 9 kids in Minot, North Dakota, and you're nothing wrong with Minot, North Dakota, but if you're living in Washington D.C., you can't be done, and so that immediately it can do it. And there's probably other factors. I think there's a lot of me, a lot of people I know are just love to talk in front of kids and rattle on about what's in their head. And not a lot of authors, that's not their skill, and especially illustrators. And it's now they can do it. So I think it's normalized author visits in a way that didn't exist a couple years ago, but it endangers making it less special as well. There's nothing as special. It's just like live music. Now everybody has Spotify, and you can listen to exactly what you want whenever you want. But I recently, and especially when you're an adult, you get out of the habit of going and hearing a live musician, and there's just nothing like it. I went and saw Dar Williams a couple nights ago, and I knew every song, but seeing a musician playing and hearing it's transporting. And similarly, there's nothing the same as meeting a creator in person who does stuff that maybe, you read a book when you're on your own, you watch a video all the time on your phone, but it's different. It is genuinely different. But it's a special, just like before, you can't, unless you're a celebrity or a performer, that's your job. It's not and shouldn't be your core business. And I do think that in 2018, while I was sort of not serious, but saying that COVID, saved me from that, because I did spiral into, I was having so much fun telling jokes and engaging kids and harvesting their ideas, which we'll get back to. It can be a distraction. There you go. And battling distraction for many of us all writers, I don't know about you, is probably the single greatest challenge as far as finishing your book. So there's that. But you're an ambassador when you visit a school. You are promoting being creative and storytelling, not just, everybody's creating stuff, and a lot of it's awesome, but the vast majority of it is watching someone fall off a bicycle or in a little window talking while somebody's playing a video game. And I think whether it's books or designing games, making games, recording music, performing music, that is the greatest. That's the top of the pyramid. That's the greatest thing. That's why, you know, you go see a sports event instead of watching people play golf on TV, or watching a sports event on TV. And when you're a creative, visiting, presenting your work in person is so awesome. You know, I don't think there's anything more, what you want to call it, more effective, rewarding. And then when you are a kids author, you gotta, I mean, I have kids, but now they're in their 20s, and you got to, we got to have actually see and interact with a real live kid. You know, those are the two pieces. You got to stay 12 years old or 10 years old, and you gotta talk to 10-year-olds or interact with 10-year-olds, because otherwise you're relying on really great editors, but you know, you're trying to create something that resonates with your audience. There's nothing worse than science fiction created by someone who doesn't read science fiction. I'm not, you know, you can just, it's like, wow, that was really great. And okay, let's see, I'm going to pick on something. That movie, there was a version of the Hulk that was done, and clearly whoever made that, an earlier one, and clearly whoever made it did not read comic books, and you could just tell.
About the Ang Lee version?
Probably, I might be. Yeah, it was like not the best one, and I mean, I'm not a filmmaker, so I can't totally dissect it. But I would say the moment I went and saw that, it's like, this person has not read a comic book, and it shows. And that's true of you know, science fiction and other things. So, but going back to interacting with kids, reading other books, and interacting with readers and writers and authors, and you know, I'm particularly, you know, all over the place today, but just the questions you're asking me now, I'm thinking about it, and you can really easily just go off in your own thing, which is another thing I hope we get to talk about, which is the, you know, the difference between, you know, I write a lot and or create a lot of stuff, and you know, there's stuff you do because, hey, someone's gonna pay me to do this. Then there's stuff that you like, that, hey, oh my God, I can't believe it, I get paid to do this. And then there's the stuff that you really want to do, and you're following your passion, and maybe it's a terrible idea and you're not sure, or maybe it's going to be awesome, and just you got to somehow stick to it, and hopefully it'll get out there because you believed in it. And all that comes from interacting with the medium and interacting with the audience.
Russell, esteemed audience, if you haven't checked the bio, Russell is a composer. He's written between 100 and 150 books. You were part of Half-Life when you worked for Valve. We're going to talk about video games, all kinds of stuff. But I want to go back to this idea of when you're interacting with kids at school visits or wherever you're at, and you're harvesting their ideas. How do you go about that ethically? Yeah.
Well, I will never, I'm not talking, I wouldn't totally steal somebody's story idea, because, well, because that's a cardinal sin. And also, you don't need to. You know, there's so many great ideas, and it's all about execution. But, you know, in the case of, so I did a series called Samantha Spinner, and it's about a girl who travels around the world, and there's secret passages everywhere, and it's all about finding hidden buttons in doors. And the greatest thing, you know, I would present to schools and libraries, including always play the theme song, but presenting to schools, and all the time, you know, because you're trying to get kids' imaginations going and get them engaged in your story. You know, I always say, what if that air vent, you know, what if you could push a button and a ladder came down and it took you to a high-speed monorail, you know, and that's in the story. But so then kids are always like, oh, you know, there's a mailbox on my house, and I always thought that you could pull a lever on that, and there's a water slide, you know, and kids just, it's a great way to engage the audience. But every now and then, you know, some kid, this is the best one, and I haven't stolen it yet, but I'm going to. I was in this private school in St. Louis. I cannot think of the name. And did a little presentation, and afterwards some girl came up to me and she said, and also, by the way, not, as you know, 9 out of 10 questions are, I have a cat. And then the teacher gets really mad. That's not a question. But a kid came up to me and said, there's a museum where I live. And I'm like, that's nice. And she said, and they have doll houses. And I said, oh, that's great. And I think that's the end of the question. And then she said, well, what if you had to find the right dollhouse and rearrange the furniture in the dollhouse? And if you put all the chairs and tables in the right position, then something opened and there was a button. And I went, we're going to do that. So I don't know. So that was great. And then the other really important thing I got, I mean, this goes into the whole philosophy of everything goes in the book. When you're an author, you got to absorb, stuff just rattles around, and everything everything that you're interested in, you'll find a way to get it into your story. And I remember a kid, there was a recurring character in my book series, the older sister, who's just awful, and her goal in life, she inherits $2.1 billion, and her goal is she's going to buy a unicorn. And I way overused her. She's too much in the book. And then so I said, she's not going to be in book 3 in this series. It's just, I just need to get back to the main characters and the plot, because it's always fun to write the maniacal villains. And then I went and I did a presentation at a school, and a girl immediately stood up and said, when Buffy finally finds her unicorns, what's she going to name them? And I said, oh. And that's how book 3 in the series starts. The girl saying, Mother, nobody uses adjectives to name unicorns anymore. Don't you know anything? So those are examples of just, you get ideas, but also most important is you just see what kids are interested in doing, and what t-shirts they've chosen to wear, and sometimes what books they're lugging around while you're trying to get them to read your book. Things like that. So that's the real value, other than you're giving back. We are all in the business of getting kids to still care about books, or getting kids to want to be creative. Actually, I think it's more about the book, but it's like being creative. And I consider myself an ambassador of smart fun. I want if there's a single message, or single 2-point message that I always want to get out of my books is it's okay to be silly, and it's fun to be smart.
Well, I would say the clock is ticking on the dollhouse idea, because I've heard it now. And esteemed audience is listening.
Isn't that a good one?
So if you're going to harvest that idea, I'd do it immediately.
Yeah, isn't that a good one? Yeah.
And of course, my next question is, Mr. Jens, I have a cat.
And then the teacher goes, Nolan, we've been over this 100 times. That's not a question. In fact, you never want to make people feel bad. That's the prime directive. I'm not there to make anybody feel bad. But sometimes, like you're a school visit and everybody's coming, and you're waiting for the one class that hasn't showed up yet or whatever, I sometimes go, okay, let's play a game, everyone. Let's play That's Not a Question. And then I say, how old are you? I have a cat. And all the kids shout, that's not a question. But you got to be careful, because no matter what, some kid is going to raise his or her hand and say, I've been to Peru. And you don't want all the other kids to turn and scream at her, that's not a question. So, but it's a great activity. And it's also, I get to be in on the joke, because the thing that cracks me up about That's Not a Question, when a kid raises his hand and says, I have a cat, and is that the teacher gets so angry. And I just think that is hilarious, because it's like their entire everything they've worked for has just been demonstrably invalidated because, little Timmy didn't understand the difference between a statement. So you see the teacher tenses up and says, Nolan, we've been over this 900 times. That's a statement. And I just think that's really funny. The tension. Anyways.
I think one of the angriest I've ever saw my 5th grade teacher. We had a beekeeper come in, and all of us ask, how many times have you been stung? Have you ever been stung? Just all variations on, we don't care about how you're getting the honey. We don't care about how you take care of the bees. How many times have you been stung? And she was just turning bright red in her face. Ask something else. Stop asking this question. Somebody would raise their hand, like, you're not going to ask about being stung. No. Mr. Beekeeper, how many times have you been stung?
So. Yeah, that's, long time ago, somebody introduced me to somebody, a couple, and they came over, and one of them was a magician, and he was like a serious serious magician, and he did corporate events and stage productions, and he was a professional magician, and he was telling us how it really annoys him that people, when they hear, oh, you're a magician, oh, my kids would love you, and you could tell it was beneath him. And my thought is like, don't be a magician, because it just, it's you don't be a beekeeper and present at a school full of elementary kids and then be annoyed if someone's going to ask you how many thousands of times have been stung. In fact, that's what things like that inspired me when I'm presenting 1, 2, 3 Scream. That's that's my latest book, and when I go in and do school author presentations. I got the idea, and I don't have it because you said please take the bells off the cat and don't have any noise. I went and bought a colossal 7-foot diameter eyeball, and inflatable. It's designed for I think shopping malls and Halloween, and I just inflate that, and it does all the work. It does all the heavy lifting, and because kids are like, it's a giant eyeball, and it's the greatest. It's the greatest. It was a stroke of genius, if I may say so myself, because it does all the work. As far as getting kids excited, engaged, telling them that this is going to be scary, sort of, and kind of funny, and but most importantly, it's giant eyeball. So
eyeballs kind of seem to be a theme with 1, 2, 3 Scream. They're all over the beautifully illustrated cover.
Thank you.
123scream.com. Most of the icons are either ears or eyeballs.
Yeah.
So why eyeballs? What was that a decision that was made while you were writing? When did you decide
Nope.
eyeballs is how we're gonna promote? And what is it about eyeballs that
well, partly because I really didn't want this to be a Halloween story with pumpkins and bats and vampires. That's been the battle with telling people about explaining the book. This is really meant to be like the Twilight Zone, or but silly and fun. And so bats and pumpkins. I do not put a bat on the cover. Do not put a pumpkin on the cover of this, or skeleton on this book, because then it just gets lumped in. It's just that much harder to get people to understand what you're trying to do. And also I thought, hey, I can own the eyeball. My goal is to, when you see a big giant eyeball, it's like if you see a shield with a star on it and a blue and white circle, you go, oh, Captain America. Anybody else does that, and it's Captain America. And so I figured, oh, what a great brand item. Own the eyeball. And there is something really funny about just one giant eyeball. And so that's and I think that was my inspiration for that. And also in the conceit in 1, 2, 3 Scream, they don't show it. It's written from the fictitious vantage of the author R.U. Gins, which is an excellent question. And we never show the author. You never show, even though it's written in the first person, the beginning and the end and the middle. There's some interludes. We don't illustrate. There's a lot of illustrations. It's a heavily illustrated book, but I said, okay, we don't ever want to show the author, and then so the eyeball once again it's just a great way to do a shorthand for here he is, or here that person is. In fact, my hope is that if it makes it to video series, which it's always out there as a possibility. I want it to be not a person who looks like me, but I would like it to be a person who is very different from me, hopefully, and who hosts the stories. And once again, the eyeball is a great way to leave that wide open.
So why, when you've spoken at the Library of Congress, when you've been out promoting Samantha Spinner, when you have an established brand as Russell Gins, why do you want to be not an anonymous author, but less present? Why would you want an eyeball instead of you?
Well, probably a mistake. That's one. Two, I had the idea, I wanted to create crazy stories that came from another character. And by making it R.U. Gins, it would sit on the shelf next to my other books, because I'm Russell Gins. And so it would be right next to all my other books, but as a different thing. And that's why I chose that. But that said, my editor many years ago, like when I did Samantha Spinner, I wanted to do like a Lemony Snicket, make up a character and she said, no, don't do it, because I don't think Random House can pull that off. And she was right. And it was good advice. And I probably should have stuck with it. But for a funny little book of short horror stories, why not? Why not? Because it's just kind of fun. And because although I'm being all about the author now, I really wanted to be all about the stories. And that was the other reason. I wanted to make who the author is part of the story. So if you read 1, 2, 3 Scream right off the bat, from the introduction, it's a big fat joke. And the author is hiding somewhere, and he's only writing this book because he found out all these things that are really true. And you shouldn't read these, but if you do, be careful. And so it sort of fit what I'm trying to do. That said, everything is, especially in our internet, social media linked world, everything by not not having it be another Russell Gins book, it makes it just that, there's just one more layer to punch through. So I do not recommend you writing another book under another fake name, unless you're so popular like J.K. Rowling or Stephen King that you can do the Bachman books and everybody knows and it doesn't matter. But I think then there's because it is the same audience. Now it's different when Max Brellier has like a different age group, so he writes under a different name, and Daniel Handler was writing books for a very much more mature audience, with sexual content. So he didn't use Lemony Snicket, so Lemony Snicket, which is such an but that's well executed. It's the perfect name. It is the book, the whole Lemony Snicket piece of it. So it works. But I think unless that's your calling and you're going to stick with it like Mark Twain, I don't think it's all it does is create some dissonance in a universe where we're just grasping for 0.2 seconds of someone's in attention before they move on. They swipe or they click or whatever. How's that?
Makes sense. I did wonder, the author tells us in 4 words, the foreword it's 4 words, which gives you a nice preview of the humor that is to follow. Tells us that he's typing with one index finger. That's fictional, right? You did write 150 books.
No, that's okay. For those of you who don't know, the introduction to the book is that the person is writes sitting on the floor of the potato chip aisle of a grocery store or in the library where the librarians are afraid to ask him to leave, and he's typing one word at a time, and it's just because it's funny. And I did the math. I did calculate how many keystrokes at the end, and I wonder if when it went through the final copying editing, if that number is completely wrong. But oh my goodness, if somebody out there ever, adult or kid or anyone ever said, hey, this is wrong. There are 1,978 keystrokes in this book, not 204,052 keystrokes. I can't imagine anything better, that somebody actually cared enough to check.
Well, you've written under a number of names. You were Clyde Bosco, which absolutely tickled me because I was a child in the 90s and I remember the Nintendo Adventure books. So, I remember that. Right.
You have a friend for life. That's awesome. Yeah, I wrote as Clyde Bosco because I've always just loved the idea of fake names. Also, I was working for a bunch of kid magazines. Magazines, for those of you who don't know, they were made out of paper and they were like web pages, but they were really slow and you couldn't click on them. Anyways, I worked on a bunch of magazines. I worked on Electric Company, and I worked on Sesame Street, and I worked on the greatest of all, which was called 321 Contact. And it was my first job, and I was so excited. And I get to make up puzzles. I get to wait. You want somebody to go to space camp and come back and write a story about it? So I was just so excited that I was just doing lots and lots and lots of writing in this kids magazine, and that it started to look like a little weird, like by Russell Gins, in as far as bylines go. And so I started making up names, and my favorite was I wrote a bunch of stories as Kravis Winewater and Jacques Barnyard. I liked that one. And then I did a bunch of Christmas stories, and so I published as Hans Shingle. But which comes back to a central theme of being an author, which is you're entertaining yourself. If you don't think it's fun or worthwhile or funny, nobody else is. Or what's wrong with those people? And so mostly like with the names, with the eyeball, I'm having fun. I'm entertaining myself, and especially because a lot of what I write is humorous. I crack myself up, and my partner comes in and she's like, "What's going on? Are you laughing at your own jokes?" And I'm like, if I don't think it's really, really funny, nobody's going to think it's slightly funny. And I'm not saying all my jokes are really, really funny, but they wouldn't be funny at all if I didn't think they were funny. And so that's where all this is coming from.
So how do you? We talked about comedians before, and obviously you're not a comedian, but how do you test out your material? Do you have earlier beta readers who will come back and say, that joke didn't land for me? Like, do you get a certain number of people that nobody laughs at the joke? They're like, well, I guess that one's just for me, so that's out.
I do have beta readers, which is just a circle of friends, very small circle of friends. My partner is a fantastic. She's a professor. She teaches history at George Mason. She's not in the kids literature at all, but we have a lot of people in our lives who are great, are beta readers, and so she's my first firewall. And then, but I spent a lot of time with my intimate group of friends saying, "Is this funny? Is this funny?" And so that's where it comes from. And then the other thing is I'm just harvesting jokes, that I've absorbed from all my favorite, from the Pink Panther Strikes Again, and everything that that I've seen and heard, and there's time tested comedy, but yeah, you have to in a lot of different ways workshop it. which makes me, if I can get off the comedy part of it for a second, one thing that I thought I would want to share with you, when I was sort of thinking about what can I bring to this conversation, is I made this discovery when I was in my second Samantha book. There's an app called VoiceStream, which it's a text to speech thing, and I don't know. There's a lot of other ones, but there was something really good about it. It was a free app, and then it was selling you different voices for $4 a piece that you could, then it would read your document back. And I got in the habit, and I still do it now. I bought two voices. One was like Josh, an 11-year-old boy, and Ella, a 10-year-old girl. And so I write a chapter, and then I sit back either in the car or at night or whatever, and I have them read it back to me in a kid's voice. And it's fantastic, fantastic tool. And the other thing about it, especially with kids stuff, is, you can, as an author, and this is true, I assume, with YA or adult fiction, you think of it, you picture that, Morgan Freeman's reading your book, or somebody, out loud, when you hear it in your head, you can easily picture it, the best person, Patrick Warburton delivering your prose. And whereas a kid doesn't read that way. Most kids are reading, he went to the door and he opened it, and it that's how a lot of, especially with the younger kids, and maybe that's a little too stumbling, but kids don't deliver it like they're on stage reading a monologue. And because this software is a little chunky, it doesn't sound like a robot, like, Siri. I don't think it, or Alexa, but it's a kid's voice, but every now and then it mispronounces a word, or every now and then there's an unnatural pause, or it reads through a punctuation mark. And I think it's a fantastic tool, because you get to hear exactly how one of your readers is going to take in your story. So that's a great tool. I wanted to, as far as, the equivalent of workshop and a joke. I do that with all my more serious, substantial writing, because you get to sort of go into how hopefully it is in someone's mind's eye.
That's a great tip. Unless you can arrange to just be there for every person who's ever reading your book and just look over their shoulder and no, read it this way. But if that's not an option, then this is probably the better way to go.
Yeah. And absolutely. And then my other secret weapon is my mother. She's in her 80s, but she's a fantastic editor, and she has zero experience or affinity for children's writing and literature whatsoever. And so she's a great person to read something, and she's my mom. So I have to sort of wade through the, how'd you come up with this? Or wow, but once you get past that, she's such a great resource for, I don't get it. What just happened there? Describe that better. It's not clear, because she's completely doesn't take in the I would say the baggage of, you've read a million kids books and picture books and stories. And so that's another fantastic resource for the actual craft of describing something. And so that's my other secret weapon.
Gotcha. So when you're drafting and you're not doing the school visits, what does your average work day look like? What's a successful writing day?
Successful writing day for me personally, not to sound horrible, is that I get anything done whatsoever. Some people say, the hardest part of being a writer is staying in the chair. And especially because, I do stuff. Some of my books, I call them kitchen sink books, where it's just full of stuff. And so I got to go look, there's the Hope Diamond. So I got to go online and look up about the Hope Diamond, and wait, I want them to get in a pneumatic tube. Who invented the pneumatic tube? And so I spend so much time. You can go off into, and that is just the distraction while you're actually or already started writing. But I think it is so, some people are so disciplined. I am, for me, it's a tremendous challenge. I've tried a lot of different things. I actually spent a bunch of money once, a couple years ago. Somebody came up with it was a little portable keyboard. I've already forgotten. It was like a something writer, it was a little laptop. It was almost a toy, but it had a really good keyboard and a little screen, and it wasn't internet connected. And it was just, for writing interrupted. I forget what it was called. It was a piece of junk, and I wound up never using it. It was, it sat on my desk, and then I sold it on eBay. But it was the idea of just totally focusing on writing. And I know there's lots of functions built into your operating system. And I bet Microsoft Word has shut up and write mode, where you engage, and it supposedly turns off, distractions and emails. But that is without a doubt my personal, the hardest challenge. And I'm going to reference him one more later. That's why Stephen King is a god. The idea that he is, for decades was disciplined enough. And, we all, he gets up in the morning, has breakfast with his family, and then goes sits in a room, which I assume is a very nice room in a very nice house, and can go into a trance. I think he's called it a hallucination, and just write X thousand words or for hours and hours. And then at some point in the afternoon, he gets up and spends the rest of his day encountering people who say, gosh, you must have this, I wish I could write like you. And he must be thinking in his head, well, have you tried it? So I think that, that is, he's and there's a bunch of people. I even have friends who can do that, and who can just focus and do it. And I think part of it is the nature of what I write, and most of it is, personal foibles. The way my brain is built, it is really hard. So for me, writing is all about getting momentum. I don't know. It's like there's this, and everything about when I'm actually doing the writing, it's all about getting momentum, and then, so I always have like a candle. This is, we all have different tricks. I have a candle, and when I'm actually writing, I light the candle. And there's days where I don't even write, I never get to that point. But at some point, now I'm actually doing it. I'm actually writing. Words are appearing. They're going on they're leaving my fingers one at a time, or 10 fingers at a time. And then I get to light that candle. I do have like a target 1,000 words a day. And I would say never, almost, unless I'm just really cranking. I don't always get there. And I mean, I have written more, but I would say on average, I'm between 0 and 800 a day, which is pathetic. And because I'm sure if I had any discipline at all, I could do 3 times that. And let's see, one of my heroes, Louis Sacker, I remember reading, he said he writes 750 words a day. And that's his thing. And he always does it. And I should be able to do that. It's sad that I don't, but I'm that type of not everybody's that way. There's, the pantser versus the plotter, and there's the storyteller versus the word counter. Storyteller's not the right word. I don't know, a chapter a day.
150 books, whatever you're doing, it's working. The books are getting done. True. But some of those books only have 75 words. And so yeah, you're right.
And yeah, but that is without a doubt the hardest part. And I bet that's, I don't know if you struggle with that. I bet a lot of authors. I work with the guy Jay Cooper. I don't know if you've ever had him on his show. He is a machine. He like discipline, and I think it's because he comes out of the advertising industry, or the where you don't it's going on Broadway on Saturday night. You can't sit around and say, oh, I never finished it. And but he can like say, I need to illustrate 12 pages by the time I'm getting on a plane, and by the time I get off this plane, I'm going to have 12 pages done, and he can just do it. And I'm in awe of people like that. And I'm an extreme train wreck on the other side of that scale, where I got a million ideas, and it's like, oh, please, can I just get some of this down? I think, and most of it's discipline. It's discipline and practice, and it's easy, which goes back to, I did too many school visits, because that made it so much. I had this idea that I was going to drive around and I was going to visit a school and come home in the afternoon, write a chapter, go visit a school, and that it's impossible. No way, can't do it. Or at least I can't. And and so that's why I was saying, okay, that was the upside of COVID, which there was very little upside otherwise.
I want to defend middle grade word count just a little, because I have written and am writing an adult story currently, and I've written several middle grade books, like Rob Worm's Bird Adventure, available now, esteemed audience. But when
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Could you say?
I said like Rob Worm's Bird Adventure, which just came out last month. Pick up your copy, esteemed audience. But when I'm writing for adults, I have no problem getting between 1,000 and 2,000 words a day, which is still going to make like a Shauna McGuire is not going to be impressed by that. But when it's middle grade, I'm lucky to hit 500 consistently every day, because those words, that real estate is so much more valuable. The story
100%.
has to move so much faster. I can't spend 1,000 words describing the house, the character, whatever else. The kids aren't going to have the patience for that. And so that does slow me down a little bit, just in defense of lower word counts when you're writing for children.
Oh, I think that is 100% true. I do a lot of writing, like when I do nonfiction writing, it's not about word count. It's about, did you get what you need across? Because a lot of the stuff I do when I've done a lot of books on dinosaurs and teaching someone about space or whatever, and that's different, because it's not about, at least for me, it's not about creating something, seeing a scene in your head and trying to convey it and getting the right emotion across. So I would say 100%. It's, yeah, you have to make your real estate, your word count when you're writing for a younger audience, but also when you're writing a story with, you're trying to convey characters, you're trying to convey something that doesn't exist, get someone to share your hallucination and feel the way you want them to feel. And then I labor over every word, and that's part of it. That's part of it. I think so. When I was saying before, I have a word count, that's more the just getting myself the discipline to get going on my own work. I think I know a couple writers have said this, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly how you feel. It's like, the more you want to do something, the harder it can be to do. And for somebody to say, yeah, I'm going to pay you to write a story and print it and put it in front of a couple people, that to me is the greatest thing ever. And so it's hard to do it. Whereas, someone says, here, write 10 facts about dinosaurs and what life was like in the Pleistocene era. I can just crank that out, because that's just, and so that's the difference. So I guess when I was referring to word count earlier, that was thinking about just motivating, get discipline and motivating. But then, partly because I'm a songwriter as well, then I get the stuff down and then I push it around forever, and craft it. Because like you said, you only have, whether it's a song or a junior story or a middle grade novel, every word is really important because you're trying to hold someone, to get them to see what you're seeing.
You had mentioned Stephen King. Before we get too far away from that, something I was curious. You said that Firestarter saved you.
Oh yeah, this is a story. See, because I don't get to. I'm really excited. I get to tell this story because I don't. This is something I would never tell, like in a school or because it's. But I always say this is the power of a story of literature. I'm really excited. Thank you, because I'm glad I remember this. This is a 100% true story. About 15 years ago, I got a little sick, and I got a really bad case of vertigo, and where you're just really dizzy. It was awful. Came out of nowhere, and I was really sick. And eventually, doctors prescribed to me a medicine for it, and I started taking it, and it was great. And this was back, hopefully we're doing a little better about getting people to stop taking medicine. We have this horrendous opioid disaster because people were just giving you, oh, your tooth hurts, here's a bucket of pills, and you wind up taking 3, and then you have a medicine cabinet full of 1,000 pills. And anyways, so they gave me some medicine, and I took it, and it helped, and then I couldn't stop taking it. It was hard. And like I said, there's lots of safeguards to getting medicine, but not a lot of safeguards to stop. Now I think they've solved the problem because they're not only making it harder to get it, but giving you less of it. There's a point here in this story is so I was starting to get hooked on this medicine, and I started thinking about when I was maybe I was 12, maybe 11 or 12, I read Firestarter. And in the story Firestarter, this was my train of thought while I was lying there, completely struggling with drugs I couldn't stop taking, or I was just starting. It wasn't a severe addiction where you need treatment and everything. I was just starting to feel bad when I didn't take this medicine that the doctor prescribed. So I started thinking about the story Firestarter by Stephen King, in which the bad guys they're trying to control the girl, so they abduct her dad, and they throw him in an institution and get him hooked on taking medicine, to break his will. This is in the book Firestarter. It might be in the movie. I forget, but he describes it really well in the book. He, because the person comes around twice, the orderly comes around 3 times a day, sure that he's taken the medicine, because they're keeping him in a stupor, and he starts breaking the pills in half. And so they see him take the medicine, and then he gets rid of the other half of the pill. And so I was struggling, and I started thinking about, and I was, again, I want to stress, I was just slightly struggling. Anyways, I started breaking the pills in half, and I got off. I didn't go down into this route of addiction because of a horror story by Stephen King. And so there you go. So so where I'm going with this, in addition to all the other things we talk about, stories are awesome. Fictional characters and their world really are real, and they really can affect you in real ways. And so in addition to that guy being a machine, a disciplined person who can write for a huge number of hours and get his work done, which again puts him in a class that there are some people, but I am not one of them. But in addition, he wrote a story that really had a major positive impact on me. And so I can't tell you that there's anything in 1, 2, 3 Scream that is going to save your life, although you should be wary of robots. So maybe that's my gift to future readers of the world, that somebody out there in 20 years or 10 years is going to be faced with a horrible decision of whether or not to activate a computer or a robot. And maybe because they read one of the stories in 1, 2, 3 Scream, they're going to not push that button, and I will have given back to the world through my literature.
These are one of the great advantages. There's so many great advantages for readers, but you do pick up lots of little information. It just stays there in the back of your head, and you never know when it's going to come in handy. If maybe it's something that could save your life, maybe it's just as much as having a clever anecdote with the right person at the right party. You could look.
Oh, absolutely.
Somebody you want to impress because you read and you had the information.
Yeah, this goes into the, with the demise of the bookstore and physical book and non-branded reading, and the book as a now book has to compete with so many other things like video games and the eternal chain of blockbuster movies that you can mainline 24 hours a day. I wonder if that's one of the things that is going to be fewer and far between, that if you're of a certain age and you're talking about something and I go, everybody knows that's Donald Sutherland from everybody you want to get, Donald Sutherland from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Do you remember that horrible scene? Or it could be, someone could say, how was your trip? And I say, oh, it was like William Shatner on that airplane. There was something on I swear there was some monster on the wing. We have this great shorthand, and I wonder, or I worry, there's not there, games, immersive games are awesome. And, 47, are we up to 62 Marvel Cinematic Universe shows? They are great, but I wonder if we're gonna lose, since everything is just legacy branding is the goal. I wonder if we're gonna lose a little bit of ideas that we can share or favorite little things, because it's not a great unique idea, personal idea to say I think Baby Yoda is cute, And so I wonder if we'll lose a little bit of what stories can share. It's like I said, you're not going to connect at a party with someone and they're going to say, "Oh yeah, wow, you think Baby Yoda is cute? Wow, we are really special people." Whereas, I'm sure I could mention something from a book that you liked and I liked, or a story or a song, or and we could really connect. And that's one of the great things about stories and characters that aren't a colossal big brand.
Well, anecdotally, I was with some students not that long ago, and I do feel that Baby Yoda is indeed adorable. But I was giving them instructions. I was substitute teaching, and I'm giving them instructions. And they got it, and then I smiled at them. I said, "This is the way," and they big old smile across there, and yes, this is the way. Oh, so we did have that. That's the Mandalorian. I feel is almost like a sub brand within the larger brand, and I feel that we're coming to a time where there might be Star Wars fans who don't really know who Luke Skywalker is, because we'll have moved so far past that. Maybe not Luke Skywalker, but maybe, I don't know, maybe one of the original trilogy characters that will have gotten so far away from that they won't know who that is. They'll be within their own sub genre of Star Wars. That might be in our future.
Sure, and there's nothing bad about that. But when everything has to be created to, a movie has to make $1 billion or it's considered a failure. So it's not just lowest common denominator. That's a different problem, and that's not what we're talking about. But it's like everything has to be so big and so massive. It's not, and maybe picking on Baby Yoda wasn't the perfect example, but it's not.
You got my dandruff. Don't you pick up Baby Yoda?
Yeah, okay. But I just wonder if does it push out all the other creative, funny, scary, idealistic notions that you can get. Like, we're not and again, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not again. I mean, I love digital media and games and movies and songs and stuff. But there is a unique intimacy with a story, a book, of course, but even just a thoughtful story that is a great way to connect with your audience and then other people. If I like something and you like something, and it becomes a shorthand for something, and I'm wondering, is there's just so many more books and there's so much more media, and that it gets harder to, the odds of connecting over that stuff. Because we connect, let's say you and I both liked Fortnite, we can play Fortnite, but we're never going to say, oh, that red umbrella in Fortnite, wow, wasn't that awesome when we got that? It could be because you've each got an achievement, but it's just not the same as if you liked the book Holes and I liked the book Holes, and that moment when you realize that the kissing bandit was her, there isn't as much room or there isn't as many places where I see that happen with this mass media blockbusterization, and and so that's the downside of everything has to be a reboot, and everything has to be like a movie can't, Disney can't make a movie now unless there's this plan to have it be epic. There's exceptions, but there's few and far between opportunities for a major release, unless it's plugged into some bigger world. And again, there are exceptions, but I do worry on that the idea of something like, I'm thinking of something that came out of nowhere and was successful, Shel Silverstein or Harry Potter, or could those? It's a lot harder for that to happen, I think, because it's not just, and it never was, but less than ever before. Is something going to reach somebody's hands unless it either resonates. Magic, the magic can happen, the lightning in a bottle can happen, but I think everything has a marketing plan and a social media plan, and your publisher wants you to tweet this out, and I'm sure you have authors I've seen on the Middle Grade Ninja podcast, and they have a social media marketer, and otherwise it wouldn't be, you're not connecting with who's meant to connect. So I think that's a big change that we have to adjust to, and I was going to, at the end of this discussion, one of the things that I don't ever discuss with librarians and kids and teachers is the demise of the physical book. I mean, it's there. I worry that it's dying, the physical book. Stories are not dying. Well, we've gone, I'm freelancing here. Stories are not dying, characters are not dying, adventures and worlds are not dying, but the idea of a ground up tree pressed into rectangles is not, it will be around, but it will never be the focus or will rarely be the focus of a cultural phenomenon or a group storytelling the way it was, because books, when you were a kid, when you were your reader's age, books were what you did when you couldn't talk with a friend, play a game, or watch a show. And now you can always watch a show, communicate with a friend, or play a game 24 hours a day. And between 20 and 30% of all tween and teenagers are 24 hours a day, every waking moment, or 16 or 18 hours a day are using technology to communicate with friends, play a game, or watch a show. And then, so that displaces what a book was. And, there's where are the books? There's less bookstores, there's less libraries. And so I am pessimistic, whatever the word is, bearish. I am bearish on the physical book. Again, I'm bullish on characters and we're in a golden age of storytelling. Readers and audiences are more sophisticated than ever before, but the physical book is transitioning to be, I think, like candles. I think is probably a really good analogy in that, and this is world according to me, just to be clear. But I really believe that, starting in 1910, 1920, candles were no longer necessary. Where candles, you needed a candle if after 5 p.m. you wanted to play a game or watch a show or communicate or do anything. And then the light bulb came and candles were no longer required. However, here we are in 2022? In 2022, you still have candles. They are for celebrations, they're for ambiance, they're for decoration, they're for rituals, and they're for fun. And so candles are still here, but the role has transformed. And in addition, there's every major store, Target, Walmart, who's the other one I'm missing? They have a whole row of candles. There's a candle section, and so candles haven't gone away, but they have definitely, the role they play, where they are in people's lives, have changed. And I feel the physical, the book, for example, Samantha Spinner and the Super Secret Plans by Russell Ginns, in its physical book form, I think is on its way. Whether you want to say they're on their way out, they're definitely their current or tradition, what we've been thinking for decades of what a book is certainly diminished. But stories and characters and plots are definitely bigger than ever. And like I said, there's infinite garbage, but we're in a golden age of storytelling, more great stuff than ever before. And that's what I think about when I talk about the demise or decline or the evaporation of the physical book. And while I'm continuing on with this line of thought, the one thing that I do kind of think that we are going to lose is the intimacy with certainly intimacy with the physical object, connection with the physical object, and just in the intimacy with the material that probably comes with it is also diminished. And by that I mean there is not the same. You can say that I don't want to say there's no substitution, but curling up with, you like this book and you carry it around and you have a physical attachment to something like 123 Scream by R.U. Ginns that you can find out about at 123scream.com. But there's a physical, the same thing with records. There's the mysterious perseverance of vinyl, but not counting that, that I think, we're not, in some ways it's better for the planet that we are not as connected to physical things, as everything more and more, all media and our time and our attention goes to digital. But I do kind of already miss the wide swath of people who are attached to a book. My most pessimistic friend said, oh, they had a good run, books, and again, not writing, not authoring, not storytelling, but the idea of someone, a physical printed book, really gained steam in the 20th century. And I believe we're transitioning to a new phase. So like books will still, physical books. Sometimes I've heard teachers and kids call them book books. Have you heard that? Hey, hand me that book. And I think we're definitely, transitioning to, stories, authors, worlds will persist, but the idea that everybody was it was a thing, it was taken for granted, it was core, that if you said, I'm going to read a story, or if you said, Dune, what comes into your mind? Not the bad movie, or the good movie, but like you pictured a book, and I think that is now that's just one piece of it. So I see that really clear, especially with kids. And there's good about that, in that there's a lot more ways to reach people, a lot more ways to engage people. But the bad of it is, you're competing. There are kids who will never touch a book or never read. So you gotta, and so when back at the beginning of this talk, when I was saying how when you're an author and you visit kids and go to books, you're an ambassador, you're promoting the idea of books. And there's definitely times in this year where I've definitely talked to audiences, because I go to schools and it's fun and there's a giant eyeball, and where I'm promoting my books, and then kids get excited and they're going to read my books, and they're going to hopefully read your books and read other people's books, and it'll turn them on. But you can definitely sense that post COVID, or just even if forgetting COVID, just in the year 2022, soon to be 2023, there's kids who have just never touched a book, other than when they've had to. And now I'm going to segue to one of the things I've been telling people for the last couple of years. They say, "Why are you doing middle grade?" Because I definitely have felt, for the last several years of my career, is middle grade is the last time that a lot of kids are going to read a book for pleasure. I really see it. I'm sorry this is so unfun, but to talk about. But when I go to like I said earlier, you're a hero and it's a party and I've already won, because among other things, every parent who cares about their kid is delighted that their kid, it doesn't matter what the book is. It could even be something as questionable as 1, 2, 3 Scream by R.U. Gins, that you could find out about at 123scream.com. But every parent, what parent won't buy their kid any book they want because it's so good and so valuable? And but it's definitely, I feel like I'm an ambassador to that. Anyways.
Well, I don't have answers. I wish I did. I'm a bit of a heretic because I love my Kindle. I love having all my books right there, and something as easy as small. I love having them on my phone. So if I'm in line at the grocery or wherever, I can pull out my book, and I didn't have to bring a clunky paperback into the place with me. I love having all of my audiobooks right there on my phone with me. So like I say, bit of a heretic, but I also love bookstores. I love the community. The communal experience of going and meeting with other readers. I think all of that is fantastic. I think bookstores are still going to continue to have a place in our community. But if I were to give you, Mr. Jens, author of between 100 and 150 books, if I were to give you a magic wand and say, fix this, what's the one thing you think you could do if you had, I don't know, one wish, one swirl of your magic wand? How would you reverse this trend? How would you make how would you preserve our literary heritage?
Okay, well, one is you can't fix it. It's a trend. It's the way things are going. I think with certainty, the only thing I know is 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, people will not be using technology less. Technology changes, but we are on a path of screens, more and more screens, until screens are embedded in our eyeballs and our butts and our elbows, our elbows and our butts and our eyeballs. But it's an evolutionary thing, and we're riding it out. So you mentioned Kindle. That's a great solution, because it's harder and less practical to carry a book, and it gives you access. But you grew up with books, and it was a great solution. I don't know the numbers. I don't know if a significant number of kids are reading EPUBs. I think some are. I can't, I can look at my own numbers. I think when I come out with a book and you look at the sales, I think it's a very, what percentage of people who bought your books, it's probably a 2-3% maybe. But I think it's almost like a legacy thing. We want kids to read and interact with words. Now, audiobooks are booming. What's the difference? I'm not sure. What's the difference between a structured podcast and an audiobook? Now, this is a conversation. This is a podcast, but there's a lot of drama, audio drama, and it's sort of that blurs the line. So again, it's that reading the words and the depth of the imagination that comes from that, I feel is kind of being diminished. That's actually the biggest loss, because a lot of people have listened to mine or yours or other people's books as audiobooks. Are yours available on audiobooks?
Uh-huh. They sure are.
And it's awesome.
More at middlegradeninja.com.
Yeah, exactly. And a good reader, like I have an awesome narrator for 1, 2, 3 Scream, which you can find out by clicking on one of the ears, not the eyeballs, but one of the ears at 123scream.com. And it's fantastic. And in no way is that diminished in any way the storytelling. Sometimes people have to promote that and say, audiobooks are real books, but they are. It's stories. But I do feel that for a lot of people, the act of reading those printed words and going off into the theater of the mind is such a great thing. It's just like stage plays, stage theater. The theater still exists, and there is something unique about plunking down in a seat and looking through the proscenium arch, and that in the real world people don't break into song. Alexander Hamilton didn't rap, and people don't bare their souls in a monologue that is exquisitely crafted and paused with maximum impact at the moment before something fateful happens. But it's such a unique, wonderful experience. And I do think that reading a best choice of words that really connects in a book, in the printed form, either Kindle or ground up tree pulp. That to me is the same. But even that is different from an audiobook. And I have a good example, just popped into my head, because I was just talking to my friend yesterday about, have you ever read or listened to The Princess Bride, which is just so great. It's like, it's one of the best books ever written. And we were listening to it on audiobook, and it's great. I read it. It was Rob Reiner was reading it. And so it was just the greatest audio book experience I've had in a while. And here's my point is, one of the things, because I'm looking at, in addition to enjoying the story, I'm appreciating the craft. And one of the things he does in the book is there's characters whose names slowly evolve how they're referred to. So first, it's like the man in black stomped across the field. And then later on, it's the Spaniard. He turned to the Spaniard. And then slowly and very carefully and quickly, it's Inigo Montoya, the character in the book. And it's so well crafted. And I remember I was listening to it with my partner, and we rewound it a chapter to hear how he did it. Over the course of a chapter, he transformed how this character is referred to. And it was like master writing. It was master craftsperson. It was just high art, let's say. And because it was an audio book, we took the trouble, to wait, stop, pause, wait, hold on a minute. And I think we were driving, so I probably endangered us. But we went through the trouble because it was so well done. We rewound to hear that 2 sentences over again. Whereas you'll do that, but you won't do that a lot. And when you read a book, even something as light as 1, 2, 3 Scream by R.U. Gins, which you can find out more about at 123scream.com, even that, if you like something, you stay on it. You read it over again. You look at the picture and see if the picture, and it makes you smile or laugh. And that's what we're losing. That, because you can do it a little, you can rewind or watch something over again, but it's not the same as sitting there and living with the language and living with the words. So that's what, if I had that magic wand, I would look for ways to get people to really savor that part of it. Now, great stuff. Like, I don't know, if I recently rewatched Ted Lasso, which is A+. I'm sorry. If you don't think it's at least good, I don't know what's wrong with you. Anyways, but like, so I rewatched Ted Lasso, and it's not just, it's a great script, it's a great character, it's great costumes, it's great music, it's great filmed editing. So there's all sorts of depth, as rich as any story could be. But even then, it moves along, and you can catch something. Sometimes I'll turn to my friend and I'll say, hey, did you notice how the music did that? But it's not quite the same as when you're reading a book and a character. I don't know if you ever had the experience where you really got engrossed in a book and you slow down because you want to enjoy it. You want to live with that because you're oh, there's only 75 pages left, and you just want it to, and you don't get that in other mediums. That said, how would you fix it? I think mediums are going to evolve. And so when you say, what are you working on now, Russell? I'm, among other things, I'm looking and exploring other ways of storytelling. Not a crazy new, I'm not inventing things, but looking at video and vertical video and text and audiobooks in trying to look at ways to engage the reader as much as I can. I think, wow, this is a long answer, but I actually am optimistic about games and interactivity that we're going to get there. But right now, and I'm a guy who's worked a little bit on, immersive first-person shooters and certainly played tons of games. Even the densest story, like, would it be like, hey, something like BioShock, or some of these games that have a lot of content and a lot of dialogue, and certainly all it is an infinite amount of, or near infinite amount of visual art chained together with the interactivity. It doesn't have that much depth of story. Even I picked BioShock. I'm sure you could come up with some other one where there's a real story and a whole world they've built. But even so,
there's 1 and 2.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and they're great, but it's not how much character. Really, let's be honest. There's character development and there's surprises and plot twists and turns, but you're not growing and learning with the character. It's wafer thin. It's wafer thin. Even the best, richest. Now, you can have a rich visual world. I'm sounding like a Luddite. No, what I'm saying is it's not here yet. And I don't mean the immersiveness like the Oculus and stuff, which is also coming. So games are going to get better and better until people will argue whether or not we're living in a simulation or whether it's real. But really, what I'm saying is we have so far to go as far as storytelling. So even Red Dead Redemption is not much. I mean, for something that you spend easily 800 hours, if you watched an 800-hour movie, or excuse me, an 80,000 page book, you would say it's not much of a character arc. There's some, but it's at best it's a spaghetti westerns amount of characters, and whereas your favorite book, the character is real. I think you learn, you meet new characters and you get involved in their lives, and it's like, oh, I can't believe he said that, or that's what makes a story good, is like, and not just plot, and a plot is to go back to being a writer. Plot is a means to the character. It's all about characters. What's Star Trek about? It's not about space. It's about Kirk and Spock, and they're interacting with each other. And so I think where we are in the year 2022, as far as the most amazing immersive games and stuff, as far as storytelling goes, we've just barely scratched the surface. So going back to, I don't know, an hour and a half ago when you asked me what I would do to fix that, is I look forward to when the interactive experiences are more than just making choices or problem solving that rewards you with revealing a new step in a story. We're not there yet much. And in fact, you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, I worked on some choose your own adventure books, and I can't stand working on them anymore. They're great. I love them, but I don't want to do them because it's like, I always say, because people all the time ask me, hey, you want to do an interactive branching thing? And the problem is, no, I would rather write one good story than, a story that you have to, that have 16 versions that you have to wade through, and people are only gonna, see 7 of them. And so I think what's going to happen is, as we move quickly from physical books and printed page into where this is going, the total immersive and interactive or casual viewing that you can mainline, is people exploring ways to tell richer stories. And that's way behind. That's, we're making amazing strides in numbers of polygons and depth of interactivity and visualization, whereas storytelling, people are going to invent things that didn't exist. Before Oklahoma or Hamilton or Star Wars, people maybe Star Wars doesn't count because that was all about great visual, the stories, but Alien, nobody had told a story that compelling, up until that point. That type of there's been great horror, but that was like somebody took a new, a current genre and really, did everything, the characters, the story, the plot, and the pacing. And we're not near that yet in current and in the new emerging mediums. And so I look forward to it. I hope to contribute to it in small and minor commercially successful ways, but that's my extended answer to your simple question about the magic wand.
Gotcha. Well, I might, again, I'm a heretic, but for me, a nice Friday night is an audiobook and an Assassin's Creed game, because you hear that little bit of the story, and then you're just wandering around assassinating people, and you don't need to hear the game. You can enjoy the story while you're doing something with your hands, so you can have the best of both worlds. But I do wonder, given that you're concerned that we're maybe seeing the end of the physical book, have you considered pivoting? I know you're looking for new types of stories. Are you considering pivoting away from books, maybe not altogether, but pivoting more toward maybe another video game or some other type of interaction?
Absolutely. I'm continuing with books. I've got a graphic novel series coming out next, The Adventures of Super Atomic Wombat Girl and Pang, her pangolin sidekick. That's coming out, so graphic novel. So I'm sticking, and hopefully 4, 5, 6 Scream. I'm hoping that comes out, depending on how many people support 1, 2, 3 Scream. But absolutely, I have a passion project I'm working on right now. When I talk about the passion project being, there's the stuff that someone will pay to make, stuff that you really just, what a gift it is that someone is paying you to get out there. And then there's the project that you just believe in, and whether or not other people think it's a great idea, and you hope you're not insane, and that it finds an audience. So I'm actually working on a story told in vertical video and text. I made up a format. I'm calling it Ultragraphic Adventures, because it's sort of in between a podcast, an audiobook, and a graphic novel with lots of animated text. And I'm really, jumping on that trend. Well, not just jumping on that trend, but exploring ways to tell a rich story in short videos with text and a little bit of graphics. Just like graphic novels led the way to some really amazing things. So I have a story called Rescue, and it's the adventures of a three-legged robot dog who's left behind on Mars. And I got the idea for it a couple ways. One is I spend a lot of time with these dogs, and I've been learning a lot about them. And so that was one thing. And so when I started looking at, the rise of TikTok and the TikTokization of all other platforms and storytelling, I started thinking, like, what's a story? What's a point of view? Who's a character that mirrors short little videos? And I thought, a robot dog. And so that's my next big project after the graphic novels and hopefully 4, 5, 6 Scream is called Rescue, and it's semi-interactive, ultra graphic animated text-based, audio-based stories about a robot dog.
This has been just a tremendous conversation. I appreciate you being so generous with your time. My final question for you is, I always try to end on some variation of, if you could go back toward the beginning of your career, middle of your career, where would it be useful, and give yourself some advice that would have made your path easier and might make easier the paths of everyone who's watching or listening to us right now, what would you go back and tell yourself?
Two things. One, I would say learn about process of how something becomes out there, because like you could sit in a cabin in the woods and write a screenplay or design a skyscraper, and it could be absolutely awesome, but you have to learn about how you submit how you find an agent, and how you query an agent, and how you work with an agent and listen and don't do this. And you have to learn the process of how an idea becomes a book. And you can get totally bogged down in, something about characters' arcs and save the cat and blah, blah, blah. That's kind of important, but learning how the industry works, whenever somebody talks to me and they say, oh, yeah, blah, 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 Saturday morning cartoons, blah, 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 I know immediately that this person does not know how things work now, because there are no Saturday morning cartoons. And maybe that's not a good example, that the best thing. But so my going back is, I would love to have paid more attention, or somebody taught me more about, if you want to be an author, this is what you do. These are the steps. And there weren't all the resources that there are today. Like, if I want to write a book, if I want to find an agent, if I want to publish a book, if I want to promote a book, there is so much stuff online, and including this podcast, that you could really hear and learn a lot about. And I wish I had spent more time doing that stuff. And I think that is something you can really take advantage of. And then don't get the other thing I would say is, don't get distracted by not just the shiny object, but the current trend. Like, I'm a skeptic about the metaverse, for example. And I was a skeptic, in that, if you want to tell stories and say, I'm going to tell stories in the metaverse, you could spend a whole lot of time working on something that fizzles out. Gosh, I remember when Webkins and Club Penguin, and what was the other real big one at the same time? Club Penguin, and Pop Tropica. When those three things hit, thousands and thousands of people were working on creative stories and stuff. And then 3D immersive or 2D immersive world for kids just went away. And now, if you made a story or told something that had to work in that platform, uh, it would be really hard to share that. So focus on stories, focus on characters, focus on things that people want to find out what happened next, as opposed to the format, which is why I was sort of picking on choose your own adventure things. You know, the medium, that's the medium. There will always be hot mediums. In fact, and I know I'm dragging this out, Samantha Spinner series, we spent a lot of time, Netflix was really interested in optioning it. And we spent a huge, my agent and I spent a week in California and meeting and phone calls with different production companies. And they were really hell-bent on, they wanted to do a branching, it was going to be an interactive branching story like Bandersnatch. I don't know if you saw Bandersnatch. It was an episode of Black Mirror that you made choices. And it was for a moment in time, the future of entertainment, and it was a bunch of garbage, it was not very well executed and not very compelling. Why? Because it didn't have a great story. It didn't have great characters. It didn't have a plot that you cared about. Oh, that was kind of cool. I got to make a choice, but you lost interest pretty quickly. And my point there is always focus on what characters people care about. What's the world that people wish they could live in or want to know what's going to happen? What's the major dramatic question? Those are the most important things, as opposed to just a clever idea or the platform of the day.
I think that's the perfect note to end on.
Okay.
Remember, audience, where can we find you online? Probably on social media and all that good stuff.
Well, I think if I were you, and I wanted to know more about the terrifying, hilarifying stories of 123 Scream, or this guy, I would go to 123scream.com, and that's the greatest starting point. And like I said, by the time this video comes out, this podcast comes out, I'm going to have a 123 Scream YouTube Shorts channel and all sorts of funny TikToks, and relaunching a 123 Scream Instagram as well.
All right, as always, esteemed audience, for more interviews almost as good as this one, head to middlegradeninja.com. And as always, God willing, I'm alive. I'll see you next week.